Welcome back to the channel, guys. My name is Derek Coffey. I'm the founder of FWP. And if you plan on retiring at 55, then your retirement planning process has to be a little bit more involved than someone who's just retiring at 62 or even 65. Retiring at 55 requires more than just some back of the napkin math. You have to have everything laid out for you. That way you can retire and retire confidently, not have to worry about going back to work. The point of today's video is to dive into the top 5 things that I feel you should do if you are planning to retire at 55. This includes your spending, it includes your health care, what you're going to do with your investments, and then ultimately how you're going to go about filing for your Social Security. But if you understand all 5 of these concepts and ingrain them in your retirement planning, then you're going to set yourself up to retire and retire confidently. Stay tuned. Now, before we get into the rest of this video, I do want to take a moment and apologize to my current subscribers and the ones that have been following me along this YouTube journey for my lack of consistency over the last couple of months. Over the last couple of months, I've had a lot of cool changes happen in my life. I have a daughter on the way, which we're really excited about. I'm in the process of selling the majority of my coffee shop business. I'm still going to retain a small portion, but I am in the process of selling the majority of it and working through that transition. And I'm also in the process of starting a new career with a local accounting firm. All of these things I'm really, really excited about. I will probably do a video going into them more in depth in the near future. But for the time being, I do want to apologize for my lack of consistency. I'm hoping to get a system in place to where I can balance all of these things and at least get out one video a week going forward. Don't hold me to it, but I'm going to do the best that I can. But when it comes to retiring at 55, the first of the 5 things that you need to do is you have to have a handle on your spending. You have to lay out what it's going to cost you to retire. All of your needs-based items like your housing, your food, your insurances, all of the things you need to have, as well as all of the things that you want to do, all of the things that you want to do with that free time that you've picked up by retiring early. And those hobbies could include golf, knitting, traveling, whatever it is that you want to do, whatever's going to fulfill your retirement, you have to have a budget for those items. Now, in addition to those items, we also have to take into account the big ticket things that you may run into. You may have to purchase a new vehicle in the first 3 to 5 years of your retirement. You may need to put a new roof on your house. You may have to replace your HVAC system. All of these big ticket things that you don't want to be left out in the wind. You want to have something set aside for all of those things. In addition to that, we have to take into account inflation. That's been a hot topic over the last 4 or 5 years, and I don't think it's something that's going to calm down anytime soon. So in addition to understanding your spending, you also have to take into account that the cost of those items are going to go up. Now, this item in specific for retiring at 55 is nothing different than if you were to retire at 62, 65, 67, even 70 years old. You have to understand what your spending is going to be. But when you're retiring at 55, you need the money that you have saved to last even longer. We're not just planning for a 20-year retirement or a 30-year retirement. We could be looking at something like 35 or even 40 years of a retirement, and we want to make sure that you're not going to outspend what you've set aside. Now, when it comes to the income that you can expect to receive, we typically rely on the 4% rule to at least give us a baseline of what you could pull from your investments and not have to worry about running out of money. That 4% rule typically works better for a 30-year or less retirement, because that's what the 4% rule is meant to encompass. You can withdraw 4% of your beginning portfolio balance and then adjust it for inflation each year, and you have an over 95% chance of not running out of money. But when you're retiring at 55 and you're tacking on an additional 5, maybe even 10 years of income need, you may need to dial that withdrawal rate back. 4% may be a little too risky, so you need to maybe take into account a 3% or even a 3.5% withdrawal rate, which, if you need $50,000 a year, your savings amount goes from $1.25 million to $1.5 million. So, when it comes to your spending and your income in retirement, you need to have all of these things laid out and get a grasp of what they may be. Of course, things are going to change, but at least if you have a baseline to work off of, then you're not surprised, but so much. One of the ways that you can go about doing this and feel comfortable with your budget in retirement is to run a test year. If you're 53 or 54 years old and you've paid off your home, you've paid off your cars, then you're going to have a really good idea of what it costs you to live without all of those other debt payments. You're really down to the necessities. So, what I would encourage you to do is over that last year or 2 years of your career, is to live as if you're retired. That way, you can make changes to your spending and set yourself up for the retirement that you've always hoped for. So, the second problem we need to solve for if you're retiring at 55 is what we're going to do about health insurance. For most retirees who work until 65 and then retire, they become eligible for Medicare at age 65. That's their health insurance solution. For you, someone who's retiring at 55, you have 10 years that you need to cover before you become eligible for Medicare. What we want to do is make sure that you're picking the right health insurance option. That way you don't overexpose yourself and then have to spend way too much of your savings and it just ruins your retirement completely. Fortunately for you, there are options that are probably available to you. The first of which is Cobra. With Cobra, you can extend your current health insurance through your employer, but you have to pay the entire premium amount. You're not going to get that half off that your employer has been paying. You're going to have to pay the entire amount. So for a lot of people, this can become cost prohibitive. It's just way too expensive. But for some of you, the plan may be good enough and the price is right that it makes sense for you to stay on it. You just have to weigh out the pros and cons. Now, if Cobra is cost prohibitive and you just don't want to pay that much, then you could consider using your spouse's plan. If you're married and you decide to retire at 55, maybe your spouse is a year or two younger, then you could hop onto your spouse's plan and get the coverage there. Now, there are some of you where you're both going to turn 55 and you're both going to call it quits. Well, if that's the case, we have to look elsewhere for that health insurance coverage. For most of you, that's going to be a marketplace plan. The marketplace plans are all income based, and it's also based on the size of your household, but for most of you at 55 is probably just going to be two of you. But the income that you report is going to determine how much you're going to pay in premiums. Depending on where your money is stored, meaning where you save the money and how you plan to withdraw that money, you can control the amount of taxable income you're going to report. The less taxable income you report, the cheaper your marketplace plans are going to be. Now, I don't want you to confuse cheap with good. We want to make sure you have the coverages that you need, especially if you have special circumstances where you have to visit specialists or you take certain prescription medications. But based on the income you're going to be reporting once you're retired, it could severely lessen the amount of money you have to pay for your health insurance. Now, one thing you can do if you're still working, maybe you're 50, 51, 52 years old, if a high deductible health plan fits your needs, then consider funding an HSA. The beauty of the HSA is it's triple tax-free. You put the money in on a tax-free basis, it gets to grow tax-free, and then as long as you pull the money out for a qualified medical expense, the withdrawals are also tax-free. By funding that HSA, it gives you a pool of money to use towards those healthcare expenses. That way you can leave the rest of your retirement money alone. But when it comes to retiring early, especially when you have that 10-year gap until Medicare, make sure you have the right coverage and you're paying the right price for it. The third thing that we're going to do when you retire at 55 is know exactly where your money is going to come from. And even more important, we want to make sure we're avoiding any penalties for those withdrawals. Now, for the majority of you, you've saved a lot of money into your 401k, meaning it's saved on a pre-tax basis. Any money you take out, you're going to pay income taxes on. But if you take that money out before you turn 59 and a half, then you're going to be subject to not only the income taxes, but also a 10% early withdrawal penalty. Now, there are ways that you can get around that, and one of the easiest ways to do that is using the rule of 55. Once you attain the age of 55, if you leave your money in your 401k plan, you can withdraw the money that you need without incurring that 10% penalty. This is much easier than having to do a 72T. It's much easier in general just to get to your money. But by using the rule of 55, it allows you to access those funds without having to pay that penalty. Now, if you paid that penalty over a 4 or 5 year time frame, that could rack up $20,000 worth of penalties if you needed $50,000 a year. So using the rule of 55 when you're retiring early is going to be very advantageous. Now, if you've taken the time to save money into a 401k as well as other accounts, then there are still some penalties we want to avoid. Now, if you're in a taxable account, meaning you just saved money into an account, you got zero tax breaks, you just invested it and let it grow, there aren't any penalties that you have to worry about. The one thing you do have to keep in mind are possible tax consequences from long-term capital gains or even dividends. But in a taxable account, you have a lot of control over the taxes that you might owe on those withdrawals. If you saved money into a Roth account, you can access your contributions anytime. There are a lot of people that I know that have retired at 55 and they heavily rely on those contributions to the Roth IRA to get them through because they don't have to worry about any taxes. But what you do have to keep in mind is that if you withdraw any of your earnings or any of that growth before you turn 59 and a half, you're going to owe the 10% penalty as well as income taxes on that growth that you withdraw. So make sure you have a good handle on how much you've contributed. That way you know how much you could take out. And then finally, we are going to talk about that HSA account again. If you have the HSA and you withdraw money from it before you're 65 and you're not using it for a qualified medical expense, the early withdrawal penalty on that is 20% in addition to income taxes. So with the HSA, make sure you're only using it for qualified medical expenses. It just puts you in a situation where you don't have to worry about taxes at all. But make sure you have a plan of where your money is going to come from and understand the tax consequences of those withdrawals. As we just talked about, if you end up on a marketplace plan, your taxable income that you report is going to directly affect the amount you're going to pay for your health insurance. If you have everything planned out properly, you could get very good health insurance for very little cost as long as you're pulling the money from the right accounts at the right time. The fourth thing we have to talk about if you're planning to retire at 55 is what you're going to do with your investments. For a lot of people, when they retire, they get way too conservative way too quickly, and they maybe overexpose themselves to safer assets as opposed to incorporating the growth assets that they need to make sure their money lasts over the long haul. You have to keep in mind that we're not planning for that 20 or 25 year, maybe 30-year retirement. We're talking 30 to even 40 years worth of a retirement. So the last thing you want to do is invest in a way that your money doesn't keep up. It doesn't grow enough for your purchasing power to keep up with inflation. We want to structure the portfolio in a way that you're going to get the long-term growth, but also provide you the protection when markets go down. The biggest risk to your retirement is sequence of return risk. And what this means is that you retire, you start withdrawing money, and the markets immediately start going down. A good example of this would have been if you would have retired in 2000. Even with a 60-40 portfolio where 60% of your money was in stocks, 40% of your money was in bonds, you would have lost money the first 3 years of your retirement. And if we're pulling 3.5, even 4%, depending on your situation, then you would have been fairly upset at what your account balance would have been at the end of year 3. You could consider adding some cash to your portfolio. For some of you, that might be 1 year of your income need. For some of you, it might be 2. For others, it may be 3. I personally would tap it out at 3 years of your income need, but ultimately it's whatever makes you feel comfortable. But during those rough times, if you have that much cash sitting aside, it helps you feel a little bit more comfortable about your ability to pull your income while your other assets have time to recover. But having that cash sitting there is kind of your safety blanket. You invested into a high yield savings account or maybe into some CDs, something that's going to get you some level of return. No, it's not going to be the growth that you necessarily need, but get some level of return, but also enjoy the safety of having your income sitting there and it being safe. The fifth and final thing that I want you to keep in mind if you're retiring at 55 is what you're going to do about Social Security. Now, for a lot of you, I know Social Security is probably a back burner issue because you're 7 years away from receiving anything from the Social Security Administration. But if you want to optimize what you get from Social Security, then it would be a good idea to start planning for it. Now, for most of you, if you're in a position that you can retire at 55 because you have enough money saved, then what you receive from Social Security is kind of a cherry on top. It's not necessarily needed for your living expenses. But if you look into your benefit and figure out a way to maximize it, then you could add tens of thousands of dollars of income over the course of your retirement. Now, what you have to keep in mind is if you file for your benefit at age 62, you're going to receive a 30% reduction. If you want to receive at least what you get for your full retirement age, then consider bridging the gap. Continue relying on your investments to get you to age 67. And then at that point, you get 100% of what you're owed from the Social Security Administration. If you have a little bit of extra money saved and you really want to maximize what you get from Social Security, then bridge your way to age 70. For each year you wait beyond your full retirement age, you receive an 8% increase in your monthly benefit amount. This could also add tens of thousands of dollars to your income total in retirement. So depending on what you want from Social Security, you need to make a plan for it. Some of you are going to take it at 62, and actually there's nothing wrong with that. By taking it and taking it early, it takes some of the stress off of your investments. But if you want to lock in inflation-protected income, then consider bridging that gap and waiting a little bit longer. That way those payments are as big as they possibly can be. There is no doubt that retiring at 55 is one of the most exciting things you can do. The earlier you can retire, the better, because your life is finite. At some point it has to end, and the more time you can spend outside of work and actually enjoying your life, the more fulfilling everything's going to be. But before you decide to pull that trigger, make sure you've gone through at least these 5 steps and modeled everything out. Know what your spending is going to be. Know what you're going to do about health insurance. Know what you're going to do about your investment strategy. Know what you're going to do about Social Security. Make sure you go through all 5 of these steps. That way you can retire and not have to worry about going back to work. Of course, there are those outlier circumstances where someone aims to retire, they have everything set up, and it all just falls apart for whatever reason. But for a lot of you, you can retire at 55 as long as you have enough money set aside. You can retire at 55 and not have to worry about going back to work as long as you have the proper plan in place. I want to thank you guys so much for tuning in. If you got any value from this video or any of the other videos that I put out, hit that subscribe button, give the video a like, leave a comment, especially if you've retired at 55. If you have some little tidbits of information that other people might find valuable, drop it in the comments. Let everyone know what you did and what helped you retire and retire confidently. But I thank you guys so much for tuning in. I'll talk to you soon.